I'm Bob Katnick. I'm the chairman of the Preston County Board of County Commissioners. At this time, I would like to all rise and maybe, if you would, Mr. Former Commissioner, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. As we start today, I'm assuming all of you can hear. If one of us speaks low and you can't hear, let us know, because there are microphones here we can use if we need to. Some basic rules for our workshop this afternoon. I think we're all here to be constructive, not destructive. I think all of us have the same ultimate goals in mind for the people in our county and the projects that we have. And that is whether you're a youth or whether you're an adult. I'm requesting that we respect each other and that we do not degrade to where it's not polite. If we go there, I will ask you to refrain. And if it continues, which I don't think it will, but if it continues, we will be asking that you excuse yourself from the workshop. It's important that we keep this open and professional. Depending on the number of speakers we have here, we're probably going to limit the question to maybe 3 minutes, and then they'll have time to respond to it. The reason I'm doing that, if you guys will go along and you've got something new to add or a different perspective, please step in. If basically we've already addressed what your concerns were, maybe we've already covered that topic. I would hope we can go for about 2 hours. If we need to do a little more, we'll work on it. But my experience has been most of the time, by the time you go 2 hours, you're pretty well gone around the horn. And I'd like to have everybody introduce themselves. As I had said, I'm Bob Katnick, chairman of the board.
Donna Hood, vice chair.
Jay Prince, commissioner.
Some more guests.
Hi, I'm Jean Glowacki, State Forest Program Director.
My name is Bill Nobles. I'm the regional director for the Peaks and Plains region that includes this community.
Okay. We have a partnership with Extension between the county and the state. Colorado State University has got the responsibility from the federal level. They receive about 20% of the funding for any extension position, or most extension positions, about 20% federal. The rest is made up of state funds and county funds. And having said that, I would like to maybe see if any of my colleagues would like to make any introductory remarks. Would you care to? Either one of you.
As far as...
Whatever. Do you want to say anything before we start the meeting?
No.
No? Okay. Would you like to? Okay.
I would like to. One of the reasons for this workshop was actually stated at our very first staff meeting on January the 10th, and that was so that we did get to know the 4-H director and the regional director. And we also actually made a trip yesterday to meet the president of Extension. So we need to know as commissioners where our responsibility lies going forward too. Bob and I have some experience, he more than I, with the Extension program. Commissioner Prince does not. So we also wanted this to be a learning experience.
And if I may correct, that was with the president of CSU.
Correct. What did I say?
Jay?
This is interesting. I'll learn as we go. As Donna said, I don't know a lot about extensions, but what I've learned since I've been a commissioner all of 5 weeks now, 4 weeks, is extensive. I mean, and I think the extension is an integral part of our community. It's extremely important for our youth, and I hope we can come out of here with a good, healthy working relationship so that the extensions can continue on to serve the community like it's supposed to. Thank you.
Okay. This time we'll entertain the first question. Hold your hands up if you'd like to speak, please. Who wants to be first?
Well, I asked that we adjourn the meeting then, Commissioner.
I'll second it.
Could we just go around and maybe just have an introduction of who everybody is and maybe who they're representing?
We'll start over here on the left.
Janet Freeberg, I'm the 4-H leader, parent, and treasurer of the 4-H Foundation.
I'm Carmen Cardenas. I am support staff and the office manager for Extension.
Robin Young, Extension Director.
I'm Erin Saraceno, Vice President of the new 4-H Foundation, and also a 4-H leader.
Okay.
Jackie Bubis with the Sentinel.
I don't want to get us and them, we're going back and forth.
Ashton Hutton, former 4-H horse leader. Mackenzie Huffman, 4-H parent, former secretary for the 4-H Foundation, and former club leader.
I'm Polly Miller, Vice President of the 4-H Foundation, former board. Actually, I don't know what I am, but I'm here in that capacity.
Okay.
Bob Lee, just as an observer.
Scott Raleigh, Fair Board.
Marion Squire, Fair Board.
Diane Rose, President of the Fair Board.
Dick Downey.
Joey Saraceno, son in 4-H, and I don't know what you mean by us and them, but we should all be in this together.
And your name again, sir?
Joey Saraceno.
Thank you.
Bill Baker, I am a 4-H leader, shooting sports instructor for Custer County, president of the new 4-H Foundation.
Okay.
Katie Smith.
Guess there's nobody else in your lines?
She gave-
Oh, there is one. I'm sorry, I didn't
Yes.
see you.
Katie Smith. I'm a parent of 3 4-Hers in Custer County.
I apologize, I didn't
That's
see you
okay.
that clear. Okay, you can sit back up again now.
I'm Penn Parmenter. I've been here for 26 years growing food at high elevation, teaching folks how to do that. Everybody's talking about 4-H, but you know, this is an agricultural valley, and the history here, I could put on a 2-hour presentation showing you the amount of food and high quality food that came out of here, because food grown at high elevation is more nutritious. And I've worked with the Extension ever since I've been here and seen a lot of people come and go. So, but that's what we do.
Okay.
Pat Bailey, Extension Advisory Board.
Fred Berry, past 4-H leader. Not everything at 4-H, I've been on the board.
Sure.
Sharon Berry.
See Smith back. Hello, Mary.
Mary Gums, Custer County Extension Advisory Committee. I've been involved with 4-H and the fair for over 20 years.
Okay. All right, we're going to start this thing. If you don't hold your hand up, I'll call on you. Who wants to be first?
Well, Bob, if nobody has any questions, why don't we just start with what Donna had asked us to talk about, and that's the chartering program, a little bit about how the
That'd be fine.
program works.
Okay.
And,
Sure.
and I can turn that over to Jean here because she's ready for that, because it was kind of asked that we talk about.
Can you hear him, or is he a little low?
We got him.
He's a little low.
You want him to use the mic? I think you
Someone
can just flip that around. I don't think it'd be too loud.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and start here with Jean Kowalski. She's the 4-H director now in the state of Colorado, and talk to us a little bit about the chartering program, because when Donna contacted me, she was asking for a workshop on a little bit of understanding about 4-H and some of the policies and regulations that basically are actually passed down to counties and communities to run a good, strong, healthy program. So at that point in time, unless there's any questions, I'll turn this over to Jean, and she can talk a little bit about the chartering program and why it exists.
I can do that. I spent a lot of time talking about the chartering program. It was one of the first things that landed on my plate when I moved into the state 4-H office 4 years ago. And it's important and it's a big thing because it relates to 4-H money. And if we're not passionate about 4-H, if we are passionate about it, we're equally passionate about 4-H money and how to use funds. And so this can give us a little bit of background on how that works and some of the guidelines that we are accountable to the IRS and to National 4-H headquarters. I can talk about it a lot, but you probably don't want me to, so I'm going to try to get you the most important points, and then let you ask me some specific questions that you might have about chartering and use of funds. So the way it's worked traditionally is that national headquarters, which is connected directly to USDA and to NIFA, had a group exemption number, and that was for every single club and every single group in the whole country that called themselves 4-H. And what that group exemption number did was it allowed all of our clubs and groups to call themselves a 501c3 and to use the 4-H name and emblem and to raise money in the name of 4-H to further extend 4-H educational programs. That's what that little number that the IRS gave to them did. And that went on for many, many, many years. And then about, I think probably about 9 years ago, the IRS took a look at that and they said, you know, this really is not working, because in order for you to allow clubs and groups to have that tax exempt status, you have to show us that you have guidance on how they do that and control over what they're doing. And there's no way national headquarters in Washington, D.C. could know what was happening in Colorado or any other state, right? So it really did make sense, but that was a big change if you think about it. We've gone on for like 100 years functioning this way. And now all of a sudden the IRS was saying every state is now responsible for getting their own group exemption number and handling their own guidance and control over 4-H clubs and groups. So the next step was it goes to the land-grant university. In this case, of course, that's Colorado State University. And the university talked it over with the state 4-H office, and we're fortunate enough to have a state 4-H foundation. And pretty much CSU said, you know, we don't want to have anything to do with that. We don't want to be in the business of monitoring every single 4-H club and group. So our foundation was awesome enough to take that on. And so they are an established 501c3. They're granted tax exempt status, that means, by the IRS. And then we had to go through a long, at least 2-year process, maybe longer, to jump through all of the hoops that the IRS required of us to be granted that group exemption number. They were pretty stringent. We had to gather up information from all around the state about what our 4-H clubs and groups were doing in order to apply for that group exemption number. And then we had to go through months and months of answering questions, putting together documents that we would require of clubs and groups to show the IRS that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So that's what the chartering process is. That's what it became. That's what we call it. It's always been required to be chartered. There used to just be, for some of you who have been in 4-H for a long time, just the USDA charter that we applied for. Now with this new ruling, we're required to apply for our charter from the USDA, and then you're also required to complete an annual chartering process every year with the state 4-H office. And I'm going to use state 4-H office and 4-H foundation kind of interchangeably because they are the 501c3. They hold the group exemption number, but I'm responsible in the state 4-H office for making sure that we adhere to the requirements to maintain that status. So we work hand in hand. We're literally right next to each other in the state 4-H office. So let me see how I can explain quickly what that means. What it means to have the tax exempt status is that donors who donate to you, to clubs and groups, that they can call that as a deduction, a contribution, according to IRS statutes. And we don't handle any of that in the 4-H office. Anyone who donates money is responsible for working with the IRS or with their own financial advisor on how to do that. But we can give evidence that they have in fact donated to 4-H and that 4-H is a tax exempt organization. Then the other thing is that federal tax exemption is a privilege for us because it allows us to raise money in the name of 4-H. That's the only way that we're allowed to do that is by being a chartered, recognized groups. Then we can go out, we can expand 4-H programs by raising that money. So our job is to ensure that the funds are given and used in accordance with those federal regulations. And rather than have every 4-H club leader or council chair or president be responsible for that, we've established what we hope to be the smoothest and easiest way for people to comply with that as possible. So if you're a club leader and you've started the chartering process, it may not seem very simple to you, or it probably didn't when we first started because it was new to a lot of people. But I can assure you we worked really hard with the IRS to make the steps to comply with chartering pretty easy. What it means is that every year the club volunteer with youth fills out an application to say, yes, we want to be chartered again this year. And they give basic information like who's responsible, who's the club leader, who are the youth in charge, where's your bank account, do you have a bank account, just some basic information in that application. And it also states on there that you acknowledge that you are what they call a subsidiary of the foundation. So foundation, central organization, clubs and groups, subsidiaries. So if you hear some of those terms bandied about, that's what that means. And so any club or group who's chartered in Colorado is a subsidiary, and that's what gives you tax exempt status. So, so specifically, those requirements for chartering are that application. Everyone's required to have a constitution and bylaws. And we have a template for that that is approved by the IRS. And it has a couple articles in it that are required. You have to say that you will follow the fiscal year of our group exemption holder, the foundation. You have to say that if that club or group dissolves, the money will go to the county office. Technically, it belongs to the Colorado State 4-H program, and it lies in custody in the local office where the monies were raised, because of course you want the funds to go to that county where they were raised. So Constitution and Bylaws, dissolution clause, what else? The first article, which is a lot of kind of IRS legalese, is required, and I won't go through what all that is now, but it basically just is giving a statement that you are abiding as a tax-exempt organization, that the money isn't going to benefit any one person, that no one person has total control over the money. So it has several different items that relate to that. So that's required. Now within that, clubs and groups can make up their own bylaws. They can have all kinds of things. Some clubs are really specific, like they put in their bylaws how many meetings you have to attend, what you're required to do to participate, if you're required to donate any fees. And that's great. We really want to encourage that because we want adults helping kids to think about those things and to come up with the bylaws that will govern them as a group. So as long as those certain articles that are required are met and signed and agreed upon, the club has freedom under the guidance of their county agent to develop a constitution and bylaws. So once it's approved by the club leader with the support of the agent, then it can go on file in the chartering process in the state 4-H office. In addition to that, we're required to do an annual financial report. If you don't raise money in the name of 4-H, you don't accept any donations, then the good news is you don't have to worry about financial reports. You just sign a statement that says we don't have a bank account, we're not planning to raise money, we're not planning to accept donations. If that changes, we will let our county agent know. But most clubs and groups do take advantage of their nonprofit status to raise money, and so most do have money. Some it's a little bit, and some it's kind of a lot. So that financial report is really important because that information on that financial report goes to the state foundation. And then the state foundation protects everybody in the state by filing on our behalf. So that means every club doesn't have to file a 990, the annual report to the IRS. The foundation does it for us. So that's a great support that we have from them, but it's also a big responsibility on our part to make sure that we're completing those forms accurately. So we're getting there. This, is our third, fourth year chartering, and we're all learning to do a better job of accounting for that money, and hopefully helping kids as treasurers to make sure that they're learning how to do that monthly report. And if the kids are doing that monthly report every month, then that annual report is a piece of cake to fill out. But it's required, and it has a few items on it. We tried to keep it simple. What kind of supplies did you buy? What kind of income did you have? What are the expenses that you have? And they follow specific categories that the foundation is required to report to the IRS. So it's a combination of us wanting to keep things simple and the IRS having their requirements. That's what goes on that report.
Can you kind of summarize? We're going to get a little deep in the weeds, maybe.
Okay, I can do that. So after the financial report is complete, then you're required to fill out a program of work because every club is responsible not only for the money, but for the program that they're doing. And that's indicating that what you're doing is in fact 4-H educational programming, that it fits within those bounds. So that report is required to be filled in every year as well. Along with that is an annual budget that is worked out and approved by the club leader and the extension director. So those are the things that need to be on file every year in order to be approved. And then I go through all of those documents every year with the help of some other folks And once we see it's complete, then you're chartered and you're free to go out into the world and use the 4-H name and emblem and raise and spend money in the name of 4-H. Yes.
We need some clarity on how the money can be spent once a club has raised the funds. And that seems to be an issue that needs to be resolved today.
Okay. So first of all, what's really required, and I know you already have money, but what's really expected and required is that we don't just go out and raise money for the sake of raising money. That you in fact have sat down and identified educational goals and figured out how you're going to raise the money to meet those educational goals and programs, and then you go out and raise the money specifically for that purpose, and the money is spent for that purpose. Now, in the situation we're in, if we've already accumulated a lot of funds, which a lot of clubs and groups have over the years, then you need to work with the county agent on how to use those funds. They're called excess funds. So basically, any club or group can have up to a year of income and expenses, or money for expenses, and an additional year. Anything beyond that, you need to start looking at how you're going to expend that money to further educational goals. And then in the future, we move forward and we only are raising money for specific projects. Yes?
I think Commissioner Prince had a question, or maybe Donna has a follow-up.
Just need some clarity on what you mean by educational. What do you consider educational? Because that is where we're having a problem.
Well, that's part of it, but part of it is working, again, to raise the money specifically for that. So part of the conversation should be, is this an educational goal? Is this something that benefits our 4-H youth? It's not totally black and white. I mean, there are some things that you can't do. You can't raise money in the name of 4-H and give it to another nonprofit. That's not community service. That's misuse of 4-H funds. You can't raise money in the name of 4-H and give it to an individual. As worthy as that cause might be, somebody whose house is burned down, or a flood, or some of the horrible catastrophes that we've had over the years, we all want to help. But the IRS does not see that as an appropriate use of nonprofit funds. Kids can go out and raise money specifically for a family, but then that money goes directly to that family. It doesn't go through 4-H accounts. So for educational programs, typically what we mean by that would be club activities, things that the kids are going to do in the community. It could be field trips, things that they're doing together. What are some other things that we use 4-H funds for, Bill?
Well, besides field trips, it could be other types of activities.
Use the mic, please, Bill.
You may want to use the money for let's say, putting on some type of event for like the 4-H kids or the family. You could use money for, if you designate it, you might use it to like, you could use it possibly for, if I'm not mistaken, to like build something. But it has to be specific to 4-H in general. You could do that if you pay it for that. A good example of that is we had a situation where we had raised $10,000 that we knew what it was going to be raised for. It was to support the 4-H program at the county fair. We were trying to start a building in Archuleta County because we didn't have one. And we had actually pegged that. And the nice thing is that because we had done that, the county at that point in time who was helping us was willing to let us carry it over because we were carrying it over in their account with the county. So we could have lost that money unless we had it pegged for what it was.
And that was a building that benefited not only 4-H, but FFA youth and other people as well.
It could have been, yes. Yes.
I think Mr. Prince maybe had a comment.
So the national guidelines just state that fundraising using that name is a specific educational purpose, and it's approved by the Extension Office, and that it's used for serving the youth who help to raise that money. So I think that there needs to be discussion around what those educational purposes are and planning. And it's probably going to be a little bit different for a club than it would be for a foundation or another group. Foundations typically have been used to raise money to support individual and team participation in activities and events. those kinds of things, and that's an appropriate purpose for those groups.
I'd like to call on Bill, please.
Yeah.
Gene, would fundraising in the name of 4-H given to another entity for capital expenditure be correct?
I would say that's probably borderline, capital expenditure. Now, I know we're talking specifically about fairgrounds, right?
Well, an improvement that was authorized, that the understanding that most people have of what you're going over does not allow that, because it is a capital expenditure to another entity, not a workshop for children, a camp for children, a educational experience for children. It is not an educational tool.
No, it's not.
I would like to refer that, if I may, as Chairman, back to Bill. You just said you were working to build a building in Archuleta County. How would that be different than building pins for any other county fair?
Because we raised that money from the standpoint that it was county EIN funds.
Specifically for
It was not under a
Excuse
foundation.
me, sir, I'd like to answer from you.
It was not under a foundation. It was not, and at that time, that was 20 years ago. With the new regulations and rules, it changed everything.
Yeah, I think what we've had, and I'll get back to, but what we've had here, in our meeting with Dr. Frank yesterday, he said it's a county CSU partnership. And if I've interpreted what we have here, it's basically come from the top down and exerts at the county level what used to be exerts at their authority on how they spend those funds. Is that a fair statement?
I'm sorry, could you say the last part again?
Well, it's come down from the top down.
Yeah.
And our conversations were that the county, it needs to come from the bottom up as well. And as you've explained it, I don't see there was a lot of county input into the regulations. It was top down, driven by IRS.
IRS and national headquarters.
So basically then what the county foundations used to do, CSU basically urged up, or took their authority to act as their own foundation and have to go under CSU.
Yes, they were functioning, and this group, I believe, was functioning as if they had their own 501c3, and they do not. So as a chartered group, now they're accountable for all the pieces of chartering, and they work under the direction and approval of the county agent. And then through that, the state 4-H program director.
Another question to make it quick, sir. Do you have anything on else?
No, Gene gave me the answer. It is not an appropriate expenditure.
That's fine. Okay, another question.
Gene, I guess my real question is transparency. I don't know that we ever, as the 4-H Foundation, on my tenure, ever filled out any kind of a charter or did anything specifically. It perhaps was done in our behalf, but it was never brought to our attention. And I think that really is whereby hangs the tale, is that we operated thinking we had autonomy and never did. And that was very discouraging because it created a problem that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
The pins were put up simply thinking that our 4-H kids have lots of things over at the fairground that are very dangerous and hard for them to use. We were hoping by adding pens, this would be an educational thing in two respects. Number one, it would show us as the foundation working with them as we all are supposed to be working together. And two, would relieve some of the problems that are over there that are really bad for the kids.
I do understand that. And I understand how different it feels to have been working as a 501c3 and have this change. It does feel very different, but the intention is not to swoop in and take your money, but that we have to be more accountable than we've been in the past. And so that means that those plans are approved with the county director. Now, the chartering documents I saw did have fair board or foundation board member signatures on them. Yes. So they were signed by members.
In terms of swooping in, I think maybe that's the real issue here, is we were swooped in upon.
I know that's how you feel about what just happened, but my point is, prior to that action, the documents that were signed were clear that said that your function as a foundation was to advise the county director on how to spend funds. And so spending funds without taking that step didn't follow that protocol. So I think both parties, there was probably some not clear communication on how that needed to work.
When did that take effect? this protocol that you're talking about?
We started chartering 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But foundations without a 501c3 never should have been operating that way. That's one of the things that happened. That's why the IRS came in and said, we need more accountability, because those groups didn't have a 501c3 and should not have been functioning that way.
They had 4-H in front of them. Once you tab that with a 4-H sign, you're automatically in that category.
And can I continue with that real quick? As I understand it, the 4-H Foundation here in Custer County has filled out those chartering paperworks for the past several years. So you guys have received those paperworks,
Just a
correct?
minute, one at a time, please.
So those papers have been received by higher up for the past several
They're
years.
filled out and completed by the foundation, and then they're approved by the county director, and then they're submitted into an online system for the state to review.
Okay, well, in 2015, then, the county director as well as the 4-H Foundation, we've worked in partnership with the fairgrounds several times, splitting donations that we raised efforts for to go towards their capital improvement funds. So that would technically be on the budget or in paperwork that you would have received.
It doesn't, I don't see that on the paperwork.
A check
that I examined.
that's sent.
Well, I don't review every check.
Right, I understand that. But if we're supposed to say what supplies were spent on things of that nature, then paperwork showing that we split funds or somehow accumulated funds
Would not show up on the chartering documents. That would be in your financial accountability to your county.
But that would lead us to believe that we could do that.
We have a
I'm
precedent.
saying, no, I'm saying that it doesn't show up on the chartering documents. I have no way to see that you've done that. All I have is the documents that you've submitted. If it doesn't explicitly say that, I would have no way of knowing that. Robin should know that, however.
Exactly.
So,
May I just make a
Please.
comment? Part of the misunderstanding, Joanne, through this is that since I've been a member of the 4-H Foundation, that we actually donated money to the Saddle Club for tractor repair. That's another 501c3, and Robin knew that. So we can't pick and choose. We should have been told up front.
You
from
knew
the
up
beginning.
front.
Excuse
It's
me?
in your
Just,
charter.
excuse me, please.
Thank you. There's been a misunderstanding of how we could spend the funds. And I'm just trying to show you that there's been a history where we actually, the foundation, gave money to another 501c3. So then we are in the wrong.
yes.
That's correct.
So I guess my point is, I understand what you're saying, and I see where that confusion comes in, but is it not clear that you report to the county director, to the 4-H agent? Is that part not clear? Because we want to make that perfectly clear today. If that has not...
It
like
wasn't
somebody
clear
else
to
to
us
speak.
until this became an issue in August.
Okay, in your constitution and bylaws, it says that you advise the agent.
We advise the agent. It doesn't say that that agent, it says that that agent basically is an ex officio member of our board.
The agent's responsible for all the money in the county. So being ex officio means they don't vote, and they don't need to vote because they hold the authority for all the money in the
And
county.
I'm understanding that clearly from you today, Jean.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
But I have to let you know that I think really the problem is a problem
Yes.
simply because of a lack of transparency, of a lack of us understanding the issue for years
Sure.
until there was an issue.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's it. Even the note to the bank in October, after we had had some conflict going in, was not said that this has been restated to you. So again, I feel really strongly that the lack of communication and transparency are the biggest issues here. And I know we all feel strongly that Robin's done great things in our community for Extension. There's no question about it. But on this particular issue, we feel left in the dark.
So what would you need to be able to move forward or to resolve it? And Bill, maybe you
Yeah,
want to speak to that.
that's the question I would ask is, how do you think you can move forward at this point in time? Because it sounds like to me you're exactly right. There's a communication issue here. And it's not necessarily, I don't look at this as being a major issue of anybody's fault. I classify it as an act of passion. an act of passion meeting that everybody seems to be very concerned about the 4-H program, which I find to be
Exciting.
very good.
Exciting.
But
Yes.
here's what we need to do. We need to figure out how we can move forward with all this passion to where everybody has a good understanding of what's taking place and what should take place. And I think that possibly that can happen based on, getting together and making those decisions that work the best. I'll be the first to say that this is not necessarily, what has happened here is not necessarily a good thing, but it also is a great opportunity to learn. And I think it's an opportunity where is that if you're willing to fix it by talking about it, because I don't necessarily think you have, that there should be any issue here from the standpoint of talking about how funds are used and how funds are actually designated within the county if you have that set up that way. And I don't think that that should be an issue. So I think the big thing here is that we need to talk.
Okay.
Yes.
I need to direct this to the 4-H director. What are the bylaws regarding the fact that you would have one new president having the power to kick off another board member solely? Can you please explain that to this audience because it affected our vice president?
I'll be glad to address that, Jane, at some point.
Excuse me, sir.
I
Excuse me.
asked her.
I don't have any information about what you're talking about. I don't
I'm
know what
gonna
transpired. I
defer-
know that your board changed, but I
Okay.
don't have any
I will
information.
defer to Ms. Polly Miller. Would you like to explain what happened to you?
We had a meeting at which the board members all resigned, except for myself, because I felt like it was a love or leave it issue and that we need to do something. The other board member, Cheryl Latimer, said she would stay on as well to help us get through a transition, and we weren't sure what she would do from that point on. Bill Baker came to our meeting. He had done an outstanding job in shooting sports, and we'd heard great things about him. So there was a person that we could make president, and that's precisely what we did. However, prior to that, we had the vote on the money spent. Mr. Baker actually voted, and we said, you can't because you're a non-voting member. Then the meeting was over at that point. Donna received a check from us, our board, to take to the fair board of $4,000. Again, we felt like it was really a good educational, or whatever you want to call it, tool. It's something desperately needed. There was no rancor, there was no underminedness in that decision at all. It was simply a great decision on our part. I received an email from Mr. Baker thanking us for the meeting, saying that we needed to amend the minutes, that he had not said that, and that was it.
Okay.
Shortly thereafter, I got an email having him stated that he had put Robin on the board. I mean, I could read it, I don't want to read it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, outshoot of it is that he said, I have told Robin, to stop payment on the check Donna had. And I was like stunned.
Yeah.
First of all, because this is a board. This is one man making a decision for what was really a 3-man board at the time, 3-person board. I called the bank just simply out of curiosity. I said, is it possible for a person to stop payment on a check if they're not a signer on a check? Which made no sense to me at all. The lady said to me, you're not a signer, Polly. I said, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But Donna is in her office.
Yeah.
So that's the way it proceeded.
Okay.
Shortly after, I got a note saying that I had been thrown off was not the right word, but that's how I interpreted it.
Sure.
And that the check was canceled and I had really violated the trust of the board. None of those things happened. So I felt, again, here we are, no communication, no transparency, and we're all thrown off the world. I imagine that in the local paper it will show in the Crestone graphics that I've been thrown off the board. But those are the problems that we had.
Okay.
And Robin not at any time took time to call me or to say anything to me. And Cheryl, as soon as the check had been stopped, she resigned. So basically, the board was myself and Bill.
Okay, let's go back.
Sorry to be long-winded.
okay.
I don't know another way to condense.
I understand. So I'm just hearing a lot of things, and this does relate back to that change when foundations realized or were informed that they're not independent foundations. And so some other things that probably needed to happen did not. For example, anyone who's raising money and spending money in the name of 4-H should be an approved, enrolled 4-H volunteer, because you have training in how to handle 4-H, and that avoids some of these problems, because we talked through things like do workshops with these fact sheets that explain use of 4-H funds. So that's one thing that didn't happen that I think led to some of these communication problems.
I'm sure.
So that's one thing I would certainly recommend. And I also recommend looking at changing the structure of the board. Since you're not a foundation, having a board of directors may not be the best way to function. Some of the other counties that we work with who had foundations similar to yours moved in a direction of being a 4-H fund or a 4-H council. They still have officers, they still vote. People still help make the plans for the budget. They're still just as involved, but it functions as a chartered group rather than an independent 501c3. So what I'm hearing is that some of those changes didn't happen for whatever reasons, and that's led to some of the frustration and feelings of not knowing what's going on. But those things can be adjusted.
Jean, and let me say one more thing with regard to this.
Uh-huh.
I'm the president of the Caddo Women's Association.
Uh-huh.
We Caddo women have probably put in more money into that board than any other person around here.
Mm-hmm.
We're not willing to do that if we don't have some idea of, or some way to say what we want our
Of
money
course.
to go to.
Of
And
course.
we, in all the time we've been giving money as Caddo women,
Uh-huh.
it was never made clear to us that there would be one person who could change whatever we decided. And my membership is not happy with
I'm
that
sure, I'm
response.
sure. And I don't think, it has to be clear that one person, and actually it's USDA gives it to Colorado State University, gives it to our director of extension, gives it to the
On
state
that, let me say
director.
this. No,
Well,
let
one at a time,
me
please.
interrupt.
Just a minute, Holly, just a minute,
I
please.
can't, if I
Excuse
can't
me.
explain this, then, and then it goes to the county agent, so it's up to the county agent to work with you to help you raise the money for the purposes you want and spend it. That's how it should work.
My concern is again, we're raising this money in the county. So are we really saying that then the state has authority over our money?
Yes.
Our county money?
Yes, but we
That you
don't.
put into the 4-H.
That we, okay,
Yes.
so we now are clear, thank you. And like I say, I appreciate knowing what we're doing.
Now.
Thank you.
I can tell you this much, is that if I was part of the Cattlemen's Association, the Cattlewomen's Association, what I would do is if I was going to donate money to the per se foundation, I'll call it that, I would earmark it and say, we would like to donate this money to be used specifically for this. You can do that. And then that money would be allocated more than likely to what it needed to be allocated for.
In the budget.
Yes.
Understood. We didn't realize we had to make those kinds of demands. Thank you. Appreciate your help.
Yes.
I would like to ask a quick question, Bill, if I may. Were you aware of this?
No,
Not before today. You hadn't had any communications
as far as what
of the issue we had?
with the foundation, as far as money donated from the cattlemen, no.
In general?
In general, yes.
Yeah, what did you know? We're curious, what did you know before coming here today?
What did I know? I knew that there were some issues associated with a canceled check, and that there was a lot of misunderstanding and lack of communication. And also a board that didn't understand how the 4-H program basically works when it comes to funding.
Thank you. Next question.
That one.
You said we earmarked the money as far as how it is appropriated and used. How would we make sure then that it is used in that manner?
All you do is, once you earmark it, it goes in and it's written down into
The budget.
the budget.
Budget as earmarked only for that.
Yes.
specific thing.
Yeah.
And you'd want to work with the president or chairperson, whoever it is of that group, and the director to make sure that everybody was on board with that and it was accounted for. And then you should receive a report, if you ask for one for sure, to see a report of how that money was spent.
Okay. How do we get over the issue of this check that I am holding for $4,000 being a borderline issue, which was brought up?
The $3,000 for the
Or the
borderline issue?
$4,000 for
You have to
the,
show that it's educational in nature. If I was going to go to Robin and say, Robin, this is what we want to do as a board, then you need to show how it meets the guidelines set forth by the subsidiary foundation. And that's pretty simple if you do it right.
Who makes that final decision whether it does or does not?
Well, here's my take. The reason we have committees and boards is because we want you to be involved with our programs, and we want, because a 4-H program is only as good as the people that are in it, okay? And the objective here is the children, and not be the adults, but sometimes I feel like we're doing more adult education than we are youth education. But the thing is that why we set up boards is because we want you, just like advisory boards, we want people to be able to give input to drive the program in the right direction. Because just like county commissioners, they may not necessarily represent the whole public, okay? Because they may not know. So it's really important, even from a county commissioner standpoint, that they find out what's going on within their community before they make a decision. That's what Robin's job is to make sure she understands what the board is looking for. And then to make sure that she explains to them that, well, if you want to do this, then we have to earmark it this way, and we have to make sure that we're doing it the right way. And to make sure that you may, because if you didn't do that in the first place, let's say you had allocated those funds for something else, let's say like awards, and all of a sudden you spend down half of that money, and all of a sudden you don't have enough money now for awards that it had been allocated for. So if it was me, I'd have a real problem with that as an agent. I would say, hold it, let's back up. We can allocate this, but then what are we going to do to build it back up? Because that's the first question I'd ask. $3,000 is really not a lot of money in the big picture, okay? It's not. But it is a lot to a lot of people, okay? But we also need to understand clearly if it's been earmarked for that so that we don't step on any money that has been earmarked. So that we come back, we talk to the board and say, wow, you know, we got maybe $2,500 that's not earmarked. We could spend it, but are we willing to spend it and spend all this other money for awards and then not have any money left in our account?
And as we get better at fundraising for a purpose, then I think we avoid a lot of these problems.
Yes.
And we are all still learning because, as I said, that's part of it. Where this came from, money was misspent. So this is the kind of question that I would welcome into the state 4-H office for us all to talk about and give information back to people and make decisions, and for us to confer with other people who can help guide that.
I think Commissioner Prince has a comment.
So I'll ask the question again, because I didn't get an answer. Who has the authority to decide whether money coming in is or is not for educational purposes? Is it Robin? Is it the president? It's
Robin.
The board?
It's Robin.
Robin makes the final decision?
The final decision is Robin.
Okay, but that's what I want to
But
know.
most of the time is that is, if I was in that situation, I would want to listen to my board, because otherwise why would I have a board?
I understand the communication issue, I just want to know where the buck stops.
Yes, the buck stops with the county director or the county agent.
So she gets to decide when money comes in, how it gets allocated, whether it's educational. Okay.
I would like to ask Robin, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, the chartering, the documents are right here, and they have Cheryl Larimore signature and Donna Hood's signature on them, dated in September of 16. So Donna and Cheryl were on this document. It also includes the budget of what the foundation set forth to do. In the educational tools piece, there was only $1,000 set aside. There was never any discussion on what the $4,000 was going to do when the board met in January February 6th. That is when that sitting board decided to spend that money. I wasn't there. I told them in the last meeting that we had, I wasn't able to make that February 6th date. I was told it didn't matter because I didn't have a vote anyway. The conversation had never come up before to give half of the money that was holding in the account to the Fair Board for rebuilding livestock pens. I had never been a part of that conversation. When Bill came to my office with the concern, it was the first I heard about this decision to be done. I said, let's take a minute, let's sleep on it. And the next day, Bill asked me to put stop payment on the check. I felt that was the right move before we could have a conversation on how these monies could be spent with the old board and the new board. And then at the date that we came into the new foundation board, they had all decided that that was not a good use of half of the monies that were left in the account to be spent on livestock improvements. And that's where we are right now. I sent out an email Tuesday night inviting our fair board, our commissioners, our outgoing foundation board, and our new incoming foundation board to have a conversation about this, to find out what would be the best use of these monies. But I was never a part of a conversation that happened to spend that money on improvements that essentially the county is responsible for. According to the Fair Board bylaws, it is the county that is responsible for any kind of capital improvement.
Okay, next question.
I'd like to add with that. So, along with this $4,000 transaction, within the minutes that...
Would you speak up, please?
Yes, along with the $4,000 transaction, within the minutes that the foundation board submitted, it actually states that they are taking money from the educational tools portion of the budget and giving it to the fair board. It also states that they're aware of the worksheet, Money Matters, and that they have been apprised of that worksheet and have read it, and that they're choosing to ignore what the 4-H Money Matters worksheet states. Another portion of those minutes states, we raised this money as our board, and we don't care what Extension says or what the state level says. We will spend this money how we see fit.
Okay, have those minutes been approved?
No.
So they're not official minutes yet?
But they're the minutes that decided how the $4,000...
I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't think it's an official document until they're approved by the board that was there.
They're the minutes that were submitted with the decision to spend $4,000.
They weren't submitted anywhere. They've never been submitted.
They haven't been submitted.
They were sent out.
They were sent to the entire board and to Extension.
They were never signed and submitted.
Have they been approved? Yes or no?
Can you speak to the secretary that did the minutes?
I think, is there any other question?
I'm already done. I
Okay, secretary. What?
No, those minutes were submitted to the board, but pending normal procedure, those minutes are not approved until the following meeting, and those minutes are not usually approved unless by only the board members that were present during that meeting. Correct?
Okay.
Is that normal procedure?
So it's a month after before you approve minutes.
I think we're getting a little too deep here, but
Right. But I never got my answer to what happens to a board when there's one standing person that was actually thrown off. How does one person make that decision?
I don't think it's one person. The decision should be made by Robin. That's what I'm saying. If something different happened, then that's how it needs to go forward. Is that it should be approved enrolled volunteers working with the county director to develop your constitution, your bylaws, how things are going to be handled, how people are going to be voted in. So if things weren't handled in that way in the past, then that's why there were that's why this happened.
So did you actually approve, Robin, the action that Bill did?
No, I did not, but there was a lot of tensions that were building around that, and so that's why I sent out my email saying, let's sit down and have a conversation about this.
So how do we have two vice presidents as we speak?
Because Polly didn't come to the meeting.
I don't see anywhere in the
excuse me, sir.
Everybody was invited to the meeting.
I actually invited everyone to
Just
the
a minute,
meeting.
just a minute, Bill has something. Are you through, Robin? I don't want to, down to your turn, Bill.
Everyone was invited to the meeting. The bottom line of this whole thing is it's not an appropriate expenditure. We can go round and round in the weeds for 4 days, but it's not an appropriate expenditure.
Okay. Wally?
I'm sorry, I have nothing to say. I mean, I just got dumped. So I'm a dumped human.
I don't see how someone's interpretation of inappropriate expenditure of funds and someone looking into the actions that individual was making to stop payment on the check constitutes as untrustworthiness or any grounds for dismissal or removal from a board. And our bylaws clearly state that it needs to be voted on with the majority. Well, that was 2 individuals. If Robin needed to be pulled in, then that would happen.
I think we already have that answer because Bill says that Robin has the authority because it's her foundation who serves and who doesn't. Is that correct, Bill?
Yeah, and the first thing I'd ask is, are they all 4-H volunteers?
Okay. Now, in relation to that, our bylaws do not specify as specifically as Colorado state statutes in regards to nonprofit board members and their termination and due process. I mean, it says here in the state statutes that unless otherwise provided by the bylaws, no member of a nonprofit corporation may be expelled or suspended, and no membership or memberships in such nonprofit corporation may be terminated or suspended except pursuant to a procedure that is fair and reasonable and is carried out in good faith. And for the purpose of that section, the procedure that is fair and reasonable includes no less than 15 days prior written notice of the expulsion, suspension, or termination thereof. I mean, it goes on. None of those things
That's for
were
a
followed.
501c3.
Correct.
So you have 501c3 status, but you're not your own independent 501c3. You're under the
So we can
central
pretend to be
organization.
sometimes.
Pardon me?
We can pretend that we're 501c3 and that we can get the donations and give people write-offs, but we can't. We don't fall under this.
I wouldn't suggest pretending anything.
But I don't understand how it is that we can say we're a 501c3 and get donations, but we don't follow.
You're not a 501c3.
You have that status
Okay.
as a subsidiary of the foundation, and that
Okay.
means you have to comply with everything that we set forth through the foundation. I know it can be confusing.
Okay,
You
but
have-
that's it. That's what I needed to
Because
hear.
what you're
Thank
reading
you.
there is bylaws of a 501c3.
Independent 501c3, which
That's
you
not
could
the same.
do if you wanted to apply to be one.
Basically,
Gotcha.
bottom line
And
is,
then you enter into an MOU with the county and with the state.
bottom line
Understood.
is that Robin's in charge of the 4-H Foundation under any circumstances. So to have a board is really redundant. But it does what you just said. It offers suggestions. It offers an idea of what to go, where to go with things, and how
Help
to
raise funds
and to raise funds.
and to
Exactly.
actually make guidance and to make suggestions how that money should be spent.
And that's something that should be told to anyone who, and
Correct.
the new board is here, and that information is then for them
Correct.
to go forward.
Yes.
Thank you for taking the time.
But I think that
Yes.
most boards, most councils and committees have great input into the county program. I was a county agent myself and relied heavily on those groups. So even though the agent is responsible, I took that as I need to make sure I'm doing my job to protect my volunteers and to protect staff. But as far as how the money is spent and those kinds of things, I'm relying heavily on the board, and I think that's probably.
Okay, Ms. Prerogative, I'm going to allow 5 more minutes, and then we have lots of other areas I think we need to talk about. Are we clear that we understand the categories and so forth? Yes, Sharon.
You mentioned earlier, and I want to make sure that I understand what you said. The money that goes into this foundation, council, whatever you want to call it, during a fiscal year, it has to be paid. That money has to go out. You cannot
plus
keep
1
any
year.
over.
Plus 1 year. Plus if you have a plan.
Just 1 year. How do you know what that year is going to be? Whatever you
what your
collect
average-
this year is, you can keep till next year, but then what basically you're saying though, whatever money you take in, you got to spend it on 4-H.
Of course.
You can't just say, well, we don't need all that money this year, or we'll put it off? We'll just keep it in our treasury?
Well, you keep it in your treasury. If you have more than 2 years' worth, then you want to work as a board or as a committee or as a council with your agent to come up with a plan on how to appropriately spend that money. And then going forth, you want to have a fundraising plan for everything so that you don't get stuck in that place again.
And what about the money that would be donated from an individual or a organization for the youth, for the whatever?
If it was earmarked, then it probably should be spent within that 2-year period.
Within the 2 year or within that year?
Well, it's 1 year,
That
it's that year plus 1 year. So you earmark, let's say you're trying to raise $10,000. You may only raise $5,000 that first year, so you're still working on it, and you get close to it. Let's say you only earn $7,500. You push that $7,500 towards that educational experience, whatever it may be related to fair.
And nobody's going to take the money away. It's not like if you had a bigger donation, you thought that's great, then you just want to work together to say, we have this great windfall. What do we want to do? I'm not monitoring, nobody's monitoring to make sure that all that is spent. We just don't want to get in a situation that we were in when we started, where clubs and groups had thousands and thousands of dollars that they'd had for 50-some years. That's not the point of being a nonprofit. That's all we're saying. It's a guideline so that you have an idea how much you should have and how much you should raise.
We had some 4-H clubs that had over $100,000 in their accounts, and they had been earning it for 100 years. And they're like, for what?
Kathy, any more questions on the foundation? Whenever they feel they've had a chance to be heard.
I want to make
Yes, please.
First of all, the 4-H Foundation couldn't function without volunteers. I have acknowledged that all along. And I want to give all of the credit that is due for all of those people who raised the money in the name of 4-H. There was one instance last year that I said, no, let's think about this and let's figure out a better use of spending this money. And this one was definitely a conversation that I had not been a part of before the check had been written. So that's where we are right now. But I just want to reiterate that the 4-H Foundation is not mine, it is yours. It belongs to the youth. And if these children don't have all access to what they have and all of them are benefiting from the use of this money, then that's where we have to have our conversations. But it doesn't happen without the volunteers that we have in order to make that go forward. I can't do it alone. I don't want to do it alone. I need the input from the community, and they have the best interest of the 4-H youth at mind.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else? Do we have some other areas of extension we'd like? You come for something. Would you like to make some comments, Ag, or whatever you were talking about?
Well, I'm here because of the concerns that were going on today, but I mean, 4-H is obviously a huge part of extension. I'd sure like to see more agriculture, food growing. I'm not sure how the money gets all doled out, and we teach. Robin has helped me teach classes. We have worked together for years and years. In the seed growing, I hope you all know that Westcliff was the first city or town in Colorado to have a seed library. And if you don't know what a seed library is, it is an amazing thing for communities. It's not just a seed dispensary. It's an honor system where you check out seed for free, grow it back out to seed again, and return that seed to the community. And that seed is now adapting to the Wet Mountain Valley. And no one has to pay any money. There's no exchange. There's no laws being broken. And then it maintains the seed library because the seed keeps coming back in and adapts. So agriculture here, this should be a huge topic in your extension workshop. To me, I just am glad I'm here to represent it all. I mean, the history in this county is beyond. And it isn't just hay, and it isn't just potatoes or lettuce. It's much bigger than that. And I know that because we've been doing this for 26 years here in this valley and teaching at Denver Botanic Gardens and all over the region and all over the western states. And I found out some amazing things about our place on the map. You can go into a 1939 encyclopedia of gardening and open the door to Colorado, and it has 3 towns on it: Westcliff, Grand Junction, and Denver. In a 1939 encyclopedia, 3 towns of making the food for the entire state of Colorado. Westcliff was one of the biggest producers of food for the entire state. And it was the only one listed on the map.
I don't mean to disagree,
I'm
ma'am,
just
but I'm a
saying,
native here in that.
I can't wait to talk about growing more in this community and seeing extension and the mothers go to that. I think 4-H is great, but and so is all the other things that go on in extension. But this is a plants and growing food is a huge one, especially in a valley with our history. There you go. I'm speaking up for the food. That doesn't seem to be a part of it in this meeting.
Well, I respect this, and I think that's a very real part of the extension mission, is the
I hope
agricultural
so.
part.
I hope it's always supported.
You know, it's natural resources in extension are a very important part of their program. And I respect some of the things that Robin has done with some of the gardens and master gardeners and the native plant species and these things that have contributed to that. I think we need to expand that project, but I want to get input, and in your case, you recognize that agriculture is one of the concerns.
And also, remember seeds, it's a big deal in this community, and also, Robin and I are both graduates of seed school and able to teach and train on seed saving. This is a huge part of sustainability and living in the wild.
Okay, thank you. How about some more? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I am now the treasurer of the Fair Board, and I'm also on the sale committee. So how do we work together with the Extension Office? How do we all fit? Now we know where foundation fits, how do we all work together?
Typically, fair boards have an MOU with Extension, is that correct?
Correct, an MOU, yes.
So that's outside of the 4-H program, but it would be with the Extension Office and the Fair Board.
Right.
Okay.
And usually how that dictates too is besides the memorandum of understanding, there's more of a clear defined understanding of kind of what responsibility is expectations of fair boards and what's the responsibility of the office. Normally what we find in small communities is a little bit different what we find in larger communities. A lot of times extension offices provide a lot of support for fair boards, particularly. So it needs to be well defined because that way there's an understanding of what actually is going to take place. And so you need a good level of communication.
And can either one of you supply me a couple samples that we can maybe start working
Sure.
with? Because to my knowledge, we don't have one.
Sure. And all that's good because what it does is sit you down and start having conversations about, well, gosh, who's going to be doing, like if you have a fair buck, and who's going to be doing this? And what's the responsibility of the fair board during fair time versus the extension office?
Now, as far as our monies on those two committees, how does that affect you guys?
Well, are you appointed by the county commissioners? So it's county money?
Pardon me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's counting.
So both of
But
our
my-
accounts are
the concern I have
responsible
is-
for the county.
The concern I have is you said between the county agent and the fair board, right?
An MOU?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, why the county agent? What authority do they have to make obligations for the county? Are they acting on behalf of CSU's obligation when they sign the MOU?
Well, MOUs are typically with, I don't know how your county does it. Some county commissioners directly appoint fair board members. And I'm speaking probably out of my element because you're more extension, I'm more 4-H. But, so the MOU would be just to clarify how 4-H, from my point of view, that's what I was responding to, how 4-H would work with the fair board.
Well, in our county, I think that has to go through the county commissioners because the buck stops with us on any agreements or spending or so forth.
I'm not talking about spending, I'm talking about who would, that's what Bill was saying, who would do what.
Right.
How 4-H, how extension can support the fair board.
For instance, I've been having an issue with a larger fair board where they felt that the extension office was supposed to be writing regulations and policies for the county fair, and they do not. Regulations and policies come from the fair board in the county for county fair. Our job is to actually make sure that the 4-H program guides requirements are being met. In other words, the students of good standing are actually showing at the county fair that have completed their projects, that have gotten to where they're supposed to be eligible for county fair.
Well, anything that we do in terms of MOUs will go through our county attorney first to review.
Correct, and I would think that if you were doing an MOU with the fair board, it would run through the county as well, so that you could view it.
Oh, yeah.
Most of them are pretty simple. It's mostly related to work, who does what. Yeah,
Yes.
very little. There's nothing really related to money usually on that at all.
Go ahead.
So should there be a fair board and an FFA MOU also?
Pardon me?
Should there be a fair board and FFA MOU also? Since they show at the county fair?
And a lot of counties have that. If you contact your FFA state advisor, they'll have that information for you to share.
I think the point to remember, though, it's important, it's a county fair. The county runs the fair. And the county as such provides an opportunity for the youth to exhibit and fulfill their project requirements.
Okay, I just have a comment. If the fair board does not work with the extension and FFA, then you won't have anything at your county fair.
Correct.
So
Well,
you need to cooperate with the FFA advisor and the county director, both.
And I think if you'll check your postings on the fair board, they're both ex officio members of the fair board.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, some more. I know I didn't just come here to just listen. Pat, you got any thoughts for the good of the group?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Can I make a comment to?
Yes, please.
To speak to the MOU. So I have met with my old Extension Advisory Board back in January, and my new Extension Advisory Board. A lot of them are the same members. A few of them are new members. The MOU is coming into play. If you all remember, Beverly has written out those Get Ready for Fair papers, and it delineates who does what. And in every fair board that's getting closer to fair, those are handed out. I make copies and I make sure that everybody has them to know who's doing what and when and whose responsibilities those are. So these are some of the things that will be outlined in our MOU, which is forthcoming. And it's something that certainly the county commissioners are the first ones to say, here, this is our MOU.
You've been really good with that.
Thank you very much. And so that's where we are with this. I don't have anything. I am there as an advisory capacity. I am there to help out. I am a team player. When it comes to moving panels, I can go move panels if that's what you need from me. But I am there as an advisory and an educational advisory only.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Mr. Commissioner? General Commissioner?
Any other comments or concerns in any other part of what Extension does at this time?
Any final comments?
Well, no, I guess I'd just like to say this. I really do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come up and have a conversation with you, and I'm sure Gene would say the same thing. One of the biggest problems is that what we don't like to see is we don't like to see things flare up to the extent that we think that we need to. It becomes such a big issue that you make a mountain out of a molehill type of thing. Whereas I think if we would have sat down at a table and talked about this, we probably could have solved this a lot quicker than everything basically coming to a head like it did. I think there's still a lot of growing pains here, and I think that one of the first things that you should do is try to figure out a way to all work together so that you can benefit this community. Because my personal feeling, being involved with Colorado State University Extension for almost 29 years, is that every community of the 30 counties that I work with, your extension office is an opportunity for you to bring CSU here and help you and support you, and also have a 4-H program. Without CSU Extension, you would not have a 4-H program in this community. And that's would be an unfortunate thing that you don't want to get into. And I believe that people can sit down and have a decent conversation together and figure out, even this check, you know, I don't necessarily look at that as being over yet. If there needs to be a conversation with Robin and the Extension Advisory Board and the new boards, talk about it. Try to figure out, if that can't happen, then how can we raise money to make this happen? Because it sounds to me like you have a real issue with fairgrounds facilities and things of this nature. And those things are not uncommon across the whole state. I can tell you that much for sure. Okay? Because there isn't a lot of money in these communities. Okay? There isn't. When it comes to county government having enough to fund everything that they need to do and take care of facilities, such as wiring and panels. And these old facilities are falling down. And I know exactly how you feel. I see businesses falling down across the state. So not just fairgrounds. So I'd just like to say I commend you for coming together and actually having a conversation. But the next thing is to move forward and have more.
As I summarize this, I'm going to go back to yesterday. We had a very good meeting. And we felt we need to identify what our roles are, what we can do, what CSU goes. And the underlying thing is that it will be a partnership. It will be a partnership between the county and Colorado State University. I don't mean to sound like I'm really older than dirt, but I have 40 plus years of extension experience. Either as a specialist, an agent, or volunteer leader. And I know what can happen, and there are some good things happening. There are some things that need to be addressed. But the thing that I'm pleased with today is we've had an opportunity, I think, to talk about this in a respectful manner. I want to thank all of you for respecting each other. It's important. I look at this room and I'm kind of concerned because if I were having a class, I'd make half of you get up and move over there, and I'd make half of you get up and move over here to signify that we're all together. And pardon me?
That's a 4-H class.
Well, this was long before that. But to go back to where we are, folks, let's keep communication. Let's work on communication. And Bill, that means, there's times in the past, we've talked last year or two about issues we have up here. And I think this has come to a point of we're defining our goals, we're defining each other's responsibilities, and an opportunity to go forward. And if there be no other business here, do you have anything else you two want to say? I will declare the workshop adjourned and thank all of you very much for your courtesies. Thank you.
It's still
Sure can.
Let me talk to the three of you just real quick for a minute.
You feel good?
There's 2 more letters.
You feel like you had a chance to say?
No, I don't know, Bill. More about the foundation issue than it is about the fair board and all the crap that's going on. I find it interesting she's working on a memorandum of understanding and she's not involved with the fair board with it at all. So, and that idiot. Hopefully you take it. Yeah. You need to get rid of the fair board. Okay. Because the fair board is that. Janet. She. Come out. I'm still here. I haven't left yet.
Yes.